Well, guys, thank you for coming. I wanted just to say, first and foremost, hello to you at home. I hope you get a heck of a lot out of this because I know I've poured my life energy into this class tonight, and just want to set the stage a little bit and tell you a little bit of the expectations that I have for this class. But it really starts all the way back in 2007 when I had my two twins, and the birth of my two twins literally changed my life. It changed this practice, and tonight what I want to do is actually change your minds. I want to create a shift for you. So my expectation tonight is we're going to have a little discussion about healthy living by design and what that truly means. And hopefully at the end of this class, what you guys will get from this is you'll get a life experiencing change that I had that helped me guide my practice. And it helped me change the lives of so many out in our community. But really and truly, when we get to the end of this class, if you get nothing more out of this class other than how to find your health when you've lost it and how to keep it once you've found it, then I've done my job. But as I mentioned, my story starts, not literally, but figuratively, in 2007 when I had two beautiful twins. My wife, Lori, was working at the time. And she was an amazing mother. She carried those twins all the way to about 37 weeks, which is actually term pregnancy for twins. And you know, they scheduled our C-section. We showed up for the C-section. I personally was almost late. They didn't call me from the room, but when I got to the delivery room, they were well into the delivery of my kids, and I got to watch the birth of these two awesome, amazing children. I walked over. They had 10 fingers and 10 toes. They were as healthy as they could be. But like most families, we were working families. I was here raising or running the practice, and my wife, she had to go back to work after about 12 weeks. And so when she went back to work, what do we do with our kids? What do we do, folks? Daycare. We put them in daycare, right? And what's the first thing they teach children when they put them into daycare? They teach them how to share, right? Not literally, but figuratively. My kids learned to share everything. In fact, being twins, they literally shared a bassinet first, then a crib, then a bedroom, then two beds in a bedroom. I mean, it was amazing. They shared everything. But at daycare, where daycare was concerned, they literally share spit, saliva, poop, toys. So when we have sharing going on, what's the first thing that happens when kids really start to share? Germs. They get sick, right? And our kids were no different. So let's say, hypothetically, 4, 5, 6 weeks after they went to daycare, they came home with their first sniffle. So one came home with the sniffle. Within 6 hours, 12 hours, the other one had a sniffle. And what happened in our kids, the sniffle became an ear infection in the first child. Then the second child had an ear infection. That one ear infection spread to both ears. We did exactly what every parent does. And we took our kids to the pediatrician. The pediatricians do exactly what they always do. They gave them an antibiotic and said, take them home, they'll be well. We took them home, we administered the antibiotic, 10 days on an antibiotic, and guess what? Their ears did get better. Fast forward 4, 6 weeks down the road, sniffle, ear infection, 2 kids with ear infections, 2 kids with dual ear infections, and then yet another antibiotic. Here, let's use a different antibiotic this time. Maybe we didn't get it the first time. Fast forward 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, ear infection, double ear infection, 2 kids. The story repeats itself over and over and over and over and over. And what eventually was ear infections led to wheezy bronchitis, which is just another way of saying your infant children have asthma, but we don't want to label them that way. But here, take this little breathing device home, and if you've ever tried to use a breather on an infant, they're pretty tough. They have a little Ambu bag that looks like a little CPR mask. You put it on your child's face, you give them the puff, and they take the air. Or they give you those nebulizers, which we had both, the little machine that you put on their face, and it gets the nebulizer smoke. And in that smoke, we had prophylactic steroids to help them be well in the future, and albuterol to help them breathe when they had their wheezy attacks. But long story short, their health got worse and worse and worse every single time we took them to the doctor. And to the point where we had $20 copays. And $20 copays is good insurance, folks. But we had $20 copays, and in 1 month we spent $350 in $20 copays. So we were literally in the office, in the pediatrician's office that month, about 15 times. And to say the least, our lives we're pretty darn stressed out. You can only imagine sitting by the crib at night, making sure that your children continue to breathe, worried every night and day that you're going to get a call from the daycare that you've got to come pick up your kids again and not be able to go to work. And literally while standing in the line to get another antibiotic one day, I was in the in CVS on 38th Avenue here in Myrtle Beach, and I was so frustrated, and because in my heart I knew as a chiropractor I had heard that kids could get better if we would just adjust them. You know, that we could clear their nervous systems of stress and interference, and these children could learn to heal themselves better than the antibiotics were doing. Because, by the way, were the antibiotics working? No, or they wouldn't have continued to have repetitive chronic ear infections and wheezy bronchitis and all of those things. So while standing in that line, I literally just turned around and went, I'm done, I'm fed up. I don't know what to do, but I'm leaving this place. I'm going to do something different. And I walked out to my car, and my wife was in the car with the twins, and I said, we're going to take them to the chiropractor. I personally was not trained in pediatric chiropractic, so I didn't know how to do the job, or at least I didn't think I knew how to do the job, but I knew there was a chiropractor about 10 blocks away on 48th Avenue, and his name is Bobby Finley. So if Bobby, you're watching this goes out to you. But Bobby Finley saved my children's life. I walked into his office that day. It was lunchtime. I knocked on the door. He answered the door, his own door, and I explained who I was and what I was doing there, and he looked at me and said, we need to see your kids. When can we start? And I looked at him and I said, I forgot to tell you they were in the car. So he brought my kids in, and he looked at me and he said a couple things that I'll never forget. Number one, he introduced himself to my children, and he introduced my children to his office. He made them feel at home, even though they were only 9, 10, 11 months old at the time. So he made them feel welcome, and he made us feel welcome. And then he looked at me and he said this. He said, Doc, you don't know what you don't know, but I guarantee you, you know how to take care of those kids, and I'm going to help you. And so I'll adjust your kids until you feel comfortable doing so. And that's where I'm going to pause that story, because we're going to jump into this story. That is the beginning. We're going to come back and revisit the story of my children, because I believe it was a miraculous story. But we're going to jump into this, and what I want you guys to expect from this is a dialogue. I'm not here to teach at you or speak at you. I want to have a conversation with you. And so, as I said, how to keep your health when you found it, how to keep it once you found it. Question number one. Oh, I'm sorry, not question number one. I forgot to share this. This is amazing too. Most people, by the way, when you survey 100 folks on the streets and you ask them what chiropractic is all about, 95% of these people are going to tell you chiropractic is good for back pain, neck pain, and headaches. Who agrees? Yep, that's what brings most people in to see the chiropractor. I like to show this book every time I do this talk. And by the way, I've done this talk about 200 times, but I like to show this book because this book was the first textbook ever written in chiropractic. And it was written in 1910 by Dr. D.D. Palmer, who was from Davenport, Iowa, and he delivered the first adjustment in 1895. I'm not going to give the history of chiropractic, but what I want to impress upon you is this. This book is about 1,000 pages. And nowhere in this book will you ever see that chiropractic is good for back pain, neck pain, and headaches. Rather, it talks about how we get our health back through having a healthy lifestyle and to having a nervous system which functions without interference. And so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. But what I have up here on the screen is some of the words that my practice members have told me. Because remember, most people come in here, 95% of them, thinking that chiropractors are good for fixing back pain, fixing neck pain, fixing headaches, fixing sports injuries. And I have proof from my practice members that they get much more than that when they come into this office. So we had a contest one time during Halloween, and we were trying to build the yellow brick road to wellness, and on every yellow brick, everyone wrote down what they loved about our office. Now granted, my dog here, Baxter, probably got most of the votes. However, people talked about their experience. Yes, that's right. Everybody at home, we have this awesome dog, and if you haven't met Baxter, you'll have to. If you see this years down the road and Baxter's no longer with us, I'm sure we'll have some kind of shrine dedicated to him. But nonetheless, you know, what I wanted to show here is that when I read those testimonies, we did get a lot of the, thanks Doc for helping me with my back pain, thanks for helping me with my headaches, but then there was this category of testimonies that really didn't fit the bill. And so I read things like this. Martha H., who is still a patient in our office after many, many years, says, I walk out feeling physically and emotionally healed. And what I heard when she wrote that was that she had an improved feeling of well-being. Not just feeling that her back pain or her neck pain or the symptoms that she was having got better. Tina had been suffering for 10 years and had been literally, by the state of Ohio, put on disability for 10 years for debilitating fibromyalgia. And she wrote, "I've been more mobile and energetic and able to deal with the daily life and stress that it brings." She didn't mention her fibromyalgia. She didn't mention her pain. Because what we do here in the office is so much more than that. We help to provide a better quality of life and improved well-being and enhanced ability to heal thyself and a more responsive body. So if that's not enough testimony, we're going to talk about that discussion. And now here's where we get into the questions to help guide this process so you understand this better. So here's question number one. I'm going to run down through a number of questions, a dialogue that I want you to answer, because I believe we all have the similar thoughts about health and healing, and I'm going to prove it here. Number one, why do people go to doctors? Please, you don't have to raise your hands, just answer just what comes to mind first.
Because they're sick.
Absolutely, because they're sick. Who else?
Wellness exams.
Wellness exams, or so things that, preventative types of thing, or what you call maintenance care. Absolutely. What else? You just don't feel good. So I'm going to say this, 98% of the people that answer this question, and by the way, I never answer questions that I don't already know the answers to. It's just like an attorney. And 98% of the people give me those answers. I don't feel good. I'm sick. I've got some kind of symptom, right? They don't feel good. They have a symptom. Now, I am going to pick on you. You said a wellness exam. Wellness exams are great. We get that answer too. But most people think of wellness exams as being prevention care. So would someone like to tell me what kind of exams that would be?
Dental cleaning.
Dental cleaning. Awesome. That fits into wellness. Awesome. What else?
How about a physical?
A physical exam. Routine physical. Great. What else?
OB.
What?
Your gynecologist.
Gynecologic exams. So breast exams, pap smears, prostate exams, yes and yes? Well, here, I'm going to pick on those three specifically. We talk about them as being wellness-based services or preventative care. What do they prevent? Absolutely nothing. And the reason I bring that out, they've been billed to us as prevention, but what they're preventing is nothing. It's actually early detection. And what we find from our research is that even with the early detection, how many of those things are getting less and less as we look at them across the population? None of them. And how many of those are we changing the outcomes in terms of, saving lives through cancer? Very few, right? So it doesn't change much of our outcomes. It just costs our dollars and our taxpayers a lot of money. Now, granted, I do think they're valid, and I want to make that point, but I just want to make sure most people understand that what we often think of as preventative care is truly not preventing anything. It's just early detection care. So I just want to bring that to light. But most people, absolutely most people, when they think about going to their doctor, it's because they don't feel good or because they have symptoms. Yes or yes?
Yes.
Got it. Now, not why, but when do people go to their doctors? When? Okay. I always get this pause, so I'm going to do this. It's a hard question because we want to say when they don't feel good, and that's the same question as the last. But let's do a hypothetical. Let's say hypothetically you wake up in the morning and you don't feel good. Is typically, let's call it a headache, is typically your first thought that you're going to call your doctor?
No.
No. What is it?
Take medicine.
I'm going to take something, or I'm gonna wait it out, right? So most people said, I'm gonna wait it out or try to go back to sleep and maybe it'll go away. Or maybe we're gonna walk over to that little glass mirror that we have in our bathroom that opens up. We actually have a name for it. What's it called? The medicine cabinet, right? And we walk up to this one thing that we actually name for the stuff in it, and it's this medicine cabinet, and we look to see what kind of implements of destruction we may have, right? Some lotions or potions or whatever we may have in there, or grandma's medication, whatever it is. And then we try that. So when do we call our doctors?
When none of that works.
When none of that stuff works, right? Well, I've tried this, and I've tried that, and I've done this, and it's still not going away. So now I'm going to call my doctor, right? So I always say we try it when all the other things that we've tried on our own either don't work or no longer work, okay? Now, we get to our doctor. What do we expect from that doctor's visit? What do we expect to happen?
Feel better.
We expect to feel better, don't we? How's that going to happen? What happens at that visit to help us feel better?
Usually give a prescription or something.
Right? So we get an exam, we talk to the doc, maybe they run a test or two, but usually, in the vast majority of the cases, you're going to walk out with a little white piece of paper, or nowadays they just call it into the pharmacy and send that in, and you go to the pharmacy to get a prescription. So you typically, when you go to your doctors, and by the way, this is the way that they are trained these days, that we have a chemical solution for just about any symptom, and you're going to expect to get something that was not available to you over the counter, right? And that something is usually a more powerful drug to ease those symptoms that you couldn't ease on your own. All right? Yes or yes?
Yes.
Got it. Who watches TV? All right. And at the end of, and I know that most of us now, we record things on, DVRs and Rokus, and we can fast forward through commercials. But if we watched commercials, how often do we see commercials these days on like cable TV? About every 15 minutes, yes? And how many do we see about every 15 minutes?
Half a dozen.
Let's call it half a dozen. Let's say 6 to 8, okay, every 15 minutes. So that means every hour we're getting about 20 commercials that are advertised to us. How many of those are drug ads?
70%.
The vast majority are drug ads, or, beer and alcohol and those kinds of things, right? And so at the very end of those commercials, what do we hear?
Side effects.
If you experience, And so they go through all of the side effects that these drugs. And so have you ever had this thought? I've had this thought many times. Holy crap, the cure is worse than the condition. Yes or yes, right? So here's the deal. We know that these drugs have side effects, and here's where I'm going to take a small sideline tangent. Here's the math of side effects. First and foremost, when we take one drug, remember that drug dissolves in your stomach typically, or it's absorbed through your skin, however the drug gets into your body, and then it courses through your bloodstream, doesn't just go to the big toe that is throbbing, goes all over the body to help alleviate whatever the symptom is, right? And so when we take one drug that has one possible side effect, how many side effects might we experience? Not a trick question, this one's easy. One. If it has only one potential side effect, then we have the possibility of one side effect. Here's the kicker. 2 drugs, how many possible side effects might we experience if they each have one possible? It would seem likely that it would be 2, but we have to do funky math. We have the first side effect, the second side effect, and then the interaction of the 2 side effects. So that makes 3 potential side effects if they only had one each. So when we do the math, you can take the number of drugs that are being taken multiplied by the power of the number of drugs minus 1. So if we're taking 4 drugs, that's 4 to the 4 minus 1, which is 3. So 4 to the 3rd, which equals 64. 5 drugs is 5 to the 4th, which is 625. Now with that said, that's if the drug only has one possible side effect, but we know they have 20 because we just heard the commercial rattle off 20 potential side effects. And the average senior citizen takes about 11 drugs concurrently every year. So how do we know what we're taking care of? Sometimes it's really hard, right? So I say all that to say this. We don't make this stuff up, right? We learn from our mothers, brothers, preachers, and teachers that this is the way that our health care is delivered to us. So I want to run back through what we've already said real quick. Number 1, you had symptoms. Number 2, you were unable to self-medicate. Number 3, your doctor offered an option that had potentially hazardous side effects. So here's our question. If you're already sick and the solution, which is most often a medication or prescription, makes you sicker, how does medicine make us healthy?
Doesn't.
Okay? I get that answer every time. I always say that's an easy answer, it doesn't. But we need to talk about why it doesn't. It all comes down to how our body functions. And if all we're doing is masking symptoms and not taking care of what caused those symptoms, or at the core or at the root of those symptoms, then we're doing ourselves a huge injustice. Okay? So I want you to understand, we call what we just received symptom care, we call it a healthcare system. All right, and I'm going to beat up on these words a little bit. There is such thing as a healthcare system, but a healthcare system is a system that's designed to keep us healthy. And then what we have that we call a healthcare system is truly what we call sick care or relief care. That's what the medical model is built on, because that's how our doctors are learning to take care of their patients. And let's be honest, the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies, they run the show. Okay? chiropractic care was, and I hope you see, will forever be a healthcare model when we get to the end of this class. Because as I mentioned before, it was never founded on getting rid of anything, but really giving you something back that you didn't have. Chiropractic is about getting your life back, getting your light back, and I'll explain that in a little bit, to help your body be more vibrant, better healing, better functioning than it ever was before. I love this. It says, hey, here's your problem. You're out of alignment. You know, that's our little cartoon for the day. Right? So, if we're going to understand this thing called health, I'm going to literally define it for you. The World Health Organization, which is this huge, they call it the WHO. You can go online and you can look up the World Health Organization. They have all kinds of statistics on countries and how well they do relative to birthing rates and death rates and how well we do in overall health and healing as a country and how our systems are built. But basically the World Health Organization says this about the definition of health. They define it as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Now, some of those are big words, right? So I like to make it real simple, especially for the little ones in the crowd. Here's how we define health. If I take these and put some different words to this, I say it's 100% function, not just feeling good. 100% function, not just feeling good. And the reason I want to bring it down to such a simple level is in my consults, when I talk to patients, I often will start the consult by saying, hey, what can you tell me about your health? And I recognize that it's a loaded question for most, because what most will answer to me is, Doc, I'm pretty darn healthy. I just got this. Or I've just got this. And by the way, this is the chiropractic symbol, right? Like when I'm in the elevator, by the way, people will stop me all the time. What do you do? I'm a chiropractor. Oh man, I've got one. I'm like, what would you do if I was a proctologist? So anyway, long story short, you know, it's 100% function, not just feeling good. And the reason I bring that up is because my father passed away at the age of 54. He was one of those that was unfortunate enough to have that massive heart attack as the first sign of heart disease. In fact, I love to throw this statistic out. Men who are diagnosed with heart disease, a third of them are diagnosed by that deadly heart attack. That was my dad. But had you asked him the day before if he was healthy, you'd have probably gotten a pretty good resounding, yeah, I'm pretty darn healthy. I've just got, insert the blank, whatever that would be, whatever he would say. I don't know what he would say, but I would guarantee you, he'd say, I'm pretty healthy, but, okay? And then yet he died the next day. And we've all known someone in our life, or multiple someones in our lives, who were diagnosed with, you know, stage 4 cancer and or fell dead of that deadly heart attack, who were seemingly healthy the day before, okay? So all I'm trying to say here is we cannot judge our state of health on the way that we feel solely. So if we don't, how do we judge it? Complete. Is it 100% or is it not? Are you functioning at 100% or not? And so it literally is a sliding scale. 100% is absolutely 100% healthy. 0 is dead. And we all resound somewhere in the middle, and you're either taking steps towards health or you're taking steps towards the other way. There is no such thing as stasis. Stasis and equilibrium is not a valid concept because we're not in equilibrium. In fact, I had a professor that used to say, he called it dynamic homeostasis, or homeodynamics is what he called it, instead of homeostasis. Stasis means to stay stagnant or the same. Nothing stays stagnant or the same in our bodies. Everything's forever changing. So instead of homeostasis, he calls it homeodynamics. I thought that was brilliant. Here's the deal. After all this discussion that we've already had, who in here still believes that we can find our health at the bottom of a prescription bottle? For all of you at home, nobody raise their hands. Okay? We all are resonating on the same. I believe the same thing you do. So if that's the case, if we don't find health at the bottom of a prescription jar or prescription bottle, where does it come from, folks? Come on. I had an us over here. Where does health come from? Speak up. All right, here, let me give you a hint. This one's hard. Same place as hair, fingernails, and love.
From the inside.
From the inside out. Okay? Health is one of those things that's kind of like electricity. I don't know exactly how it works, right? But I know if I flip the switch, it's on. Health is intangible. We can't touch it. We can't see it. We just know it exists, right? And by the way, we can see it. Can we not see it? You can look at a person and tell when they're healthy or tell when they're not, right? I love to ask this question. Who in here has ever gotten a cut on their finger and then looked down one day. You didn't have an ointment. You didn't have a Band-Aid. You know, it's one of those nasty paper cuts. I mean, it's one of those you'll remember forever. And what did you do? You went, right? And you did this, and you're looking around, well, I don't have anything. It'll be all right. And you just hold it until it stops bleeding, right? And then 3, 4, 5 days later, you're telling the story around the water cooler, and you go to show your battle scar, and you can't remember what finger it was on because the cut's gone away. Why? Because the darn thing healed, right? We heal. We have healing bodies. And here's the cool part. You know, I took all these, chiropractic school classes that literally mirror medical school, and I learned all these cool things about our healing bloodborne products like your immunoglobulins, like IgG and IgE. Anyone ever studied that stuff? Guess what? Your body heals too. You don't have to know anything about IgG and IgE for your body to do what it was meant to do in terms of the healing process. In fact, I always say, compare yourself to a corpse. That's where health comes from, is literally the life-born process. In fact, I took 5 semesters of gross anatomy when I was in chiropractic school. And gross anatomy is where we have to use people who have donated their bodies, and we have to dissect them, and we have to cut them open, and we learn about the human body by touching it, putting our hands on their hearts and their digestive systems and all this stuff. And I always say, never once did any of those cuts that we made on our cadavers ever magically heal, right? But yet our body does. The corpse has the same organs I did the day I started on dissection. Why is it not healing? Duh, Doc, it has life energy. It's the life that allows us to heal. It's that life force. In the East, they call it things like chi or prana. Over here in the West, I don't know if we call it much of anything. Life force. I will say this, D.D. Palmer had a really cool term, and if you hear me mention it in the office, you'll know what I'm talking about when I talk about your innate is turned on. D.D. Palmer called that life force energy innate intelligence. Okay? And he basically said in this book that we're all graced with this awesome presence that rules the universe. I call it God. He called it universal intelligence, so he didn't offend people who didn't believe in God. But he just says there's these universal principles that rule the way that our earth works, that governs everything. And that as a subset of that, human beings have this awesome, cool internal workings, very similar to universal intelligence, but on a smaller scale. And he called it innate intelligence. And innate just means that we're born with it. So you're born with this cool wisdom inside your body from the time that the sperm cell meets the egg cell and you become a single cell, and it knows exactly what its job is until the day you're born, and then everything else kicks in the day you're born. Is that cool or what? Right? So that's innate intelligence, and innate intelligence is wise, and I can't believe to be more powerful than that or more knowing than that. So here's the cool part. A lot of folks don't understand that chiropractic is built on science, and here's where we get into the science of what we do. When we start talking about that life force energy, what I want you to understand and what I want to impress upon you is that the life force energy actually flows through what's called our nervous system. So in my hand, I have a model. No, it's not real, but it is a model of a human spine. And inside this spine, what do we hold right up in here? What's up in this part of your skull? What does your skull protect right here? Your brain, right? That's your computer, right? And that brain is what tells all the rest of your body what to do. It's the most important organ in your body, and connected to that brain is this long extension from the brain that's designated by this yellow piece that goes down through your spine and is protected by your spine. And that yellow piece is called the spinal cord. And its job is to convey messages and signals from the brain down the spine, out through these little guys. You know what that's called? Anyone? Nerve. A nerve. Messages out the nerves, and those nerves go out to every organ, cell, and tissue in your body. And so the nervous system literally controls every function and therefore the health of your body. In fact, the signals move from brain down the spinal cord, out the spinal nerves to every organ, cell, and tissue. But in return, it's a two-way street. So we have sensors in our body. We call it our 5 senses. Actually, there's 7, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But we have our 7 senses that also send signals back up through those nerves, back up the spinal cord to the brain, so that the brain understands what it's interpreting. In fact, I have this one guy that I love to quote. His name is Dr. Bruce Lipton. And Bruce Lipton defines the nervous system as an organ system that is built to perceive the environment and therefore coordinate the behavior of every other cell in the body based on that perception. Right? So it's an adaptive organ at the same time. Well, we in chiropractic understand that at some points in time we can end up with interference in the communication system that is the nervous system. So what do you think would happen if we interfere with the signals between the brain and the cells of your finger, and that nerve doesn't work as healthy? What do you think happens if we interfere with those signals? It's not going to function properly, and if it's the cells in your hands, maybe your hands aren't going to function properly, right? That's absolutely correct. In fact, the interference that we talk about has a name, and we're going to talk about that interference in just a second, but I love to tell this example of Christopher Reeve. Most of us know who Christopher Reeve is, who's about my age. Christopher Reeve was our Superman, right? He's the guy that we saw on TV playing Superman in the movies. And we all know that Christopher Reeve fell from a horse, or was thrown from a horse, and he fractured his second cervical vertebrae, and it crushed his spinal cord. But what happened to Christopher Reeve after that accident? What happened to his function of his body? He lost it, right? He was paralyzed from the neck down. He had very little function at all. And what was the quality of his life after that? Even though we all know he made tremendous efforts after that with all the money he was able to raise and those kind of things. But what was the quality of his life? Probably not too good, right? It's not, quality of life really goes down when your function goes down. Well, so I use that example because if we damage the connection between the brain and the spinal cord, devastating loss of function all the way down from that point of injury down, okay? So if we injure our spines here, we damage the spinal cord here, we end up with paralysis from the waist down. If you damage it up here, from the neck down, etc. But then we also have evidence from things like the Holocaust. And in the Holocaust, even though we don't like to think of what was done to those Jewish prisoners, there were often experiments that were done that helped us to better understand the way that the nervous system is built. And they would do some experiments on people where they literally severed one single nerve. And in this example, I like to use the nerve of the C6 nerve that goes out of our sixth cervical vertebra, and it goes out to the upper parts of the arms. C5 or C6 is fine. But the C5 and C6 help to control the function of the arm. So what do you think is going to happen if I interfere with that signal and I sever that nerve? What's going to happen to the function of my arm? The function is going to stop. In fact, it's going to be just like Christopher Reeve, except instead of being paralyzed from the neck down, it's just the muscles that are controlled by C5 or C6. What's going to happen to my ability to feel my arm? We're not going to have any of that either. Just like the paralysis, I'm not going to be able to feel the area that nerve serves. Make sense? So now we've gone from damaging the spinal cord at a severe level to severing a spinal nerve. Instead of severing it, what if we just have a herniated disc and we're putting some pressure and stretch or stress on that nerve? What do you think is going to happen to that area? Let's use C6 again as an example. What's going to happen?
Limited mobility.
Maybe we lose some mobility, so we lose our range of motion. What else?
Pain.
Maybe it's going to hurt. What else?
Lose muscle mass.
Well, if the muscles aren't functioning as good, it will lose mass. In fact, it'll lose strength, and then it will atrophy. Anything else? Numbness and tinglies? You think it might be a little maybe numb, a little tingly? So what I'm trying to explain here is this. Anytime we interfere with the signal between the brain and the body, at every single level, we lose function. Depending on the level of the damage and the severity of the damage, we always lose function. So that brings us to this concept of subluxation. What we've often known in chiropractic is that it only takes a small amount of pressure on a spinal nerve to disturb the function of that nerve. In fact, there was a research study that showed that it only takes 5 millimeters of mercury pressure. Now, 5 millimeters of mercury is like when you get your blood pressure taken, they measure it in millimeters of mercury. So when they put that cuff on your arm and it squeezes your arm, think about this. They blow it up and they get it really tight, and they take it up to about 200, and you can feel what that pressure is at 200. 5 millimeters of mercury pressure is the equivalent of a dime on the back of your hand. So let's imagine flipping the dime, putting it on the back of your hand, and that little bit of pressure can be responsible for damaging the impasse of a nerve, the impulse of a nerve, by up to 60%. 60% loss of function, folks. Let me put that into perspective. Who in here has a cell phone? Most of us, even the little ones, right? What happens, you walk into Verizon, you buy a new cell phone, the first 10 calls you make, you drop 6 of them. Who's happy with Verizon? No, what are you doing? You're returning the phone, right? My service is horrible, I'm returning the phone. So if you lose 60% of a nerve's function, that means every time the brain tries to talk to the body or the body back to the brain, 6 out of 10 phone calls between the brain and body are getting dropped. We can't return our nervous systems, okay? So interference at any level is bad news. even if it's only 5 millimeters of mercury, because what that may amount to, if you're a major league pitcher and your job is to throw fastballs at 102 miles an hour, regardless of how you feel or not, if you've got a little bit of pressure on that nerve and you're now throwing 85 mile an hour fastballs, you're losing your $1 million contract, okay, whether it hurts or not. So that brings us to this concept that we chiropractors refer to as a subluxation. Now, I believe that chiropractors are we are experts in subluxation. That is what they train us in our chiropractic schools and our educations to do. We literally detect and correct subluxation. So what is subluxation? I like to describe it as a blindfold. So who drove here today? All right, so I've got a contest. For those of you at home, just humor me. So we've got a contest and we're all going to put on blindfolds today. And then we're going to see who can drive home the fastest and get there and make a phone call without taking your blindfold off and call me to let me know you made it home. And whoever gets there first gets a full lifetime supply of chiropractic care. Who's in? Those of you at home, if you can't see all the hands, no one raised their hand, right? It's ludicrous to even think that we would do that. Because why? What does a blindfold do? What's it do? It blocks our vision, right? One of our vital senses of our body. It blocks those vital senses, right? And so how well do you function when that sense is blocked? Not very good, right? It's hard. Well, I want you guys to think of that nervous system, those signals that go down through our spinal cord and through our nerves from our brain as two-way streets. So if the incoming information to your brain is disturbed, how good do you think the outgoing information is going to be to respond to the incoming information? Probably not very good either, right? And so if we think of stress on our body and the stress on that nervous system as a blindfold that results in chaos, if you're trying to drive with a blindfold, which we refer to as the subluxation, eventually that's going to lead to a crash. Imagine the crash as being symptoms in your life, and of course we're going to function in a state of poor function, or what we actually, D.D. Palmer coined, dis-ease, dis-ease. So he had a play on words. He said disease, if we put a hyphenation there, it's now dis-ease, or a lack of ease. What is anxiety? A state of dis-ease in our body, isn't it? So when your body's not functioning well because the incoming signals are disturbed, and then therefore the outgoing signals are disturbed, our body's not going to function well, and we're going to be in a state of dis-ease. That's what a subluxation is. Now, a lot of people back in the day would criticize chiropractic because some of our theories about how subluxation truly works weren't as completely solid as we would have liked them to be. To be honest, we didn't have the research to back up a lot of what we said, but we had tons of empirical evidence. And so we often described a subluxation as being a vertebral segment that's rotated out of its position and putting direct pressure on that nerve. So it was much like stepping on a water hose and disturbing, creating turbulence in the water hose. And that sounded great and it was easy to educate, but it didn't hold water, no pun intended, when it came to chiropractic science. But what we now know is that the science has become much more solid. And so when we talk about subluxation today, we have a couple big fancy words that I'm not going to bore you with today, but I want you to think about this. This spine is a sensory organ, and inside the spine are tons of joints. In fact, for every segment you have 3 joints between every vertebral segment. And so remember I told you earlier we have 7 senses, right? We all know the first 5, right? Sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. But we have 2 others that we don't always learn about in grade school, and the first is called proprioception, which basically means that we know where our joints are relative to our other joints in our body. It's why I can tell you that I'm doing my hand in circles behind my back even though I can't see my hand right now. So those joints are sending signals to my brain so that I know where I am relative to myself. I know where my head is, I know where my shoulders are, and I know where my hips are. Right? This spine is a sensory organ, so all of these joints have nerve endings that are sending signals up to the brain to tell the brain where the body is relative to itself. And it's really important because we stand upright and we walk on 2 feet and we fight gravity all day long. So what we found from the research is that actually this spine, out of all of the incoming joint information to the body or to the brain, out of all that, 60% of it comes from the spine. And then half of that 60%, now 30%, comes from these upper 2 segments. So it really is important to know where your head is relative to your shoulders, because we got to protect this thing, right? And we want to know if it's sitting straight or sitting cockeyed. And so what we know now in terms of subluxation is that when that spine is out of its normal position, it's not that it's sitting directly on a nerve, but it's that these joints are no longer sending signals to the brain, and the brain doesn't know where you are relative to yourself. And what's the concept? When you don't use it, you lose it. So our body is awesome. The nervous system, as I said, perceives the environment. It literally adapts to the environment. I call that compensation. So if you have a spinal segment that is shifted out of its position and no longer moving and hasn't been moving for 20 years, do you think you're going to compensate for that? You bet your bottom dollar you are, because your job of your body is to survive. And the only way it can survive is to compensate for a deficiency. But that builds patterns. And those patterns, while they may be a good adaptation, may not be healthy. Make sense? So in chiropractic, that subluxation, if we can measure it and we can see that it's a decrease in function, and we think that we can help to correct it by now correcting the spinal alignment and taking the stress off of the nervous system, not the nerve specifically, but the nervous system, we believe we can help to improve the function of the body. So if we go back to this blindfold analogy again, what is the solution of the subluxation? If the subluxation is a blindfold and it results from a misalignment of a spinal bone that's causing nerve interference, what is the solution, folks?
Just straighten it out.
Straighten that sucker out, right? And we straighten it out with this thing called an adjustment. Okay? Those of you who are sitting in here have already had one or maybe more adjustments. And those of you who are sitting at home, you're going to have, hopefully, numerous adjustments to help your body function better. But an adjustment we literally define as a specific directed force on a spinal bone to remove the interference, to literally remove the blindfold of your spine and allow your brain and body to communicate better and allow your body to function in a better state of ease. Notice I keep using this word function over and over and over again, and that's intentional. Because if we can change the way your body functions, what's going to happen to your health? It's going to be much better. Let's come all the way back to that medicine analogy. And we talked about medicine. How is medicine truly getting us healthy? And we said it was literally covering up symptoms. It may not be changing our function for good, or at least in total, right? We've all known somebody that, had, let's say, high blood pressure, and they were put on medication. When you take the blood pressure or the blood pressure medication away, what happens to their blood pressure? Goes right back up, right? We didn't change anything at the core. We just masked the symptom. So where chiropractic is different, chiropractic, we're delivering an adjustment to ease that interference, take away that interference, and allow the body to function better. And just by definition, if you function better, what happens to your health? You truly get healthier, right? Okay. That brings us almost to the end of this presentation, where I like to ask, who goes to chiropractors and why? Now you guys, I have this saying, when you know what you know, you will do what I do. Or when you knew, if you knew what I knew, you would do what I do. Well, now there is no excuse, because you know, right? I've imparted on you all this wisdom and knowledge that I learned years ago that I believe radically changed the way that I did my practice and take care of myself and my kids. But who goes to chiropractors and why? So we start with this question. What brought them here? Most often what brings people into this office, and it's unfortunate that we market this way as a profession, but usually back pain, neck pain, and headaches. Because by the way, in order to bill insurance, we have to have a diagnosis. In order to have a diagnosis, we have to have a symptom. Okay? So what brings people most often to the chiropractor is some kind of symptom. But what keeps them coming back is all of this wisdom and knowledge that we like to give through this class. Because the wisdom and knowledge, it's what gives us the ability to empower ourselves to take a different path. I'd like you to sometimes take a different path. I'd like you to choose the path of increased function and better your health over time. Right? So what keeps people coming back is this understanding that if the body is functioning with interference, pretty simple, it could function better without it. That's what we do. If we can eliminate the interference, your body will function better without it. Now, I always look at my patients and I say, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what that's going to look like at the end road, which, by the way, for me, there is no end road because, well, we'll talk about stress. Stress never ends, right? So I can't tell you what that's going to look like, but I just know if we could get rid of the interference, life gets better, okay? Here's something they taught to us in school. Stress creates subluxations. Now, I have a whole nother class that we gear specifically on stress, but I want to help you understand this. Stress is not just the emotional stuff like driving on the highway out here, or financial problems, or relationship problems. Stress comes in numerous different forms. In fact, it comes in 3 forms. It comes in chemical forms, So that's our chemistry, whether or not we're nutritionally fed or whether we're toxic. It comes in physical forms. We can never escape gravity, especially when we fall, right? So we have physical traumas that we've endured. We have physical stressors. We have standing too much on hard floors with poor shoes. We have sitting too much in computer desk chairs. We have video games. We now have a whole disease called text neck because we stand in line now. We don't even talk with our neighbors in line. We look down at a device. Okay? So when I say who's got stress, everybody has stress. And if you have stress, stress is what creates interference in the nervous system because that's what creates the misalignments in the spine that therefore impact the way that your brain and body communicate. Subluxations do not discriminate. Every age, race, creed has the potential to be subluxated. So when I say, who goes to chiropractors and why, what would you say?
Everyone.
Everyone. I'm going to put a caveat on that because that's an easy answer. I do believe everyone should go to a chiropractor, not to get adjusted, but to at least get checked. Because I don't know when you walk into this office if you have a subluxation or if you have nerve interference or if you have dysfunction, but we can at least check. And the check in most chiropractic offices at least entails a very detailed, what we call palpation exam, where we feel your spine and we feel how the joints and how the muscles are responding together in unison. But also in this office, we have a really cool technology. And we use a technology called the Insight Subluxation Station. It allows us to measure how well your nerves are talking to your organ systems by using skin temperature differentials. We can actually measure how well your nerves are talking to your muscles because we can measure muscles with an EMG. And then we can see how well the nerves are controlling even the rate of your heart with this cool thing that we call heart rate variability testing. And with all of that, we get to measure that function and truly see where you are and measure that and put a number to it as to where your health and healing is at that moment. And if it's less than optimal, well, guess what? We got a job to do. So if we find that you have interference, we're willing to then take on the next battle, and that's the adjustment. So subluxations don't discriminate. Anybody has the potential to create them because everybody has stress. What's more stressful than being born, right? All right. With all that said, we have a really important policy in our office. The policy in our office states this: because we understand the damaging effects of vertebral subluxations to the human health and development, it's a policy in our office that all children of patients get checked for subluxation. Why? I made it a mission that we want to grow healthy kids, not fix damaged adults. I don't want that what if we let some child go by unchecked and then 10 years down the road the parents come back and go, why didn't you tell me? Or no one told me that, or I didn't know but. I don't rest good with those kinds of statements. It tears at my heart. So my job is to make sure that all parents know with this knowledge that if their children have subluxations, they could be better without nerve interference. And that means all we have to do is check them. And the cool part is, if they look fine, we get a report, pat them on the behind and send them out the door and say, bring them back later, 3 months, 6 months down the road, and we'll test them again. Because if we can determine that they have subluxations early before they become symptoms, we can help them get healthy while their nervous system is still actively developing. Kids develop really fast. First 7 years is the most increasing developmental phase of the nervous system. We got to get in and get early. Okay? That's what we do here in the office. Now, remember that story that I started with earlier, and we were talking about my kids, and we said that, Bobby Finley told me that I knew how to adjust them, but I just didn't know how, and that he was going to show me. He delivered the first 3 adjustments to those children, and then I delivered their 4th. So I like to say, what would have happened if we had never checked them for subluxation? What would have happened? How do you think their lives would be today if they were still struggling with those same sinus, ear, breathing difficulties and those kinds of things? How do you think their quality of life would be, folks, if I had continued to give them drug after drug after drug to treat that stuff?
Poor.
It might be poor, right? Here's the thing. I believe that we don't grow out of ear infections, we grow into the next thing. We don't grow out of colic, we grow into the next thing. And those next things, we have determined through a lot of research, those become things like childhood and adult anxiety. They become ADHD, they become autism, they become spectrum disorders. Those are neurologic deficits that our kids are suffering from, and therefore our adults when they grow up, or our kids when they grow up to be adults, are suffering from too. And it's all rooted in the nervous system that wasn't checked at an early age. That again is for another topic and another class. But what would have happened to my kids if they had never been checked? I want to play that tape forward and show you that that didn't have to happen, and it didn't happen because here's the cool part. These babies that you see here that were checked before they were a year old now look like that on the right. They are my 11-year-old hearts. I love them. If you ever got a chance to meet them, you'd see that they are, I told you, you can see health. They are the healthiest children I've ever met. They literally shine through their eyes. You can see it in that picture. The cool thing is they got perfect attendance for many, many years. The first time they lost their perfect attendance is when we took them out of school for vacation. I was fortunate enough that as I learned to take care of them, we abandoned the need for antibiotics very quickly. In fact, I always say Macy, who is this one on the right, she probably had 1 or 2 more ear infections after we started chiropractic care, and then that disappeared. Wyatt may have had 1. Macy was our struggling one. She was also the one that struggled more with asthma and allergies. She now will have a little bit of hay fever during the seasonal allergy parts, but that's about it. So all the medications literally disappeared because all of the disease and the dysfunction disappeared when we started adjusting these babies. And it was that moment when I realized I had more to do. And it was that moment when I transformed my practice from a very pain-based, symptom-based practice into the wellness-based practice that it is today. And it's why I also decided to transform my practice and start going after kids and making sure that we could give kids a chance so that we could help them grow up to be healthy adults, not having to fix damaged adults. And so with that said, I like to get to this end part and offer a gift. Most people, when we're talking about the benefits that chiropractic can provide, as I'm having this conversation, they're going through their mind going, God, I wonder if that could help. Insert the person's name. So I always say, is there one person? Because here's the deal. After hearing this information about how you can get your health back and how you can keep it by getting checked often, making sure that your nervous system is adjusted, making sure that you are optimally functioning to the best of your ability with an unbelievable functioning nervous system, is there one person that you could think of that should have been here tonight? Because here's the deal. We are very present on Facebook. We have awesome ability to connect with others, and we want you, if you resonated with the story that we told tonight, we want you to share it. So we're going to give you guys links to this lecture so that you can share it with your friends and relatives to let them know what chiropractic can do for them. And we also have a really cool deal here inside our office. And this goes for anybody who's looking at this video as well. We have what's called our VIP pass, and you can pick these up here in the office. Basically, we don't ever want time and money to get in the way of people getting healthy. In fact, I often say procrastination is the thief of health, and it's time and money that usually holds us back. And so since money is one of the eliminating factors, our normal exam, which often runs about $260, if you have one of these VIP cards or you mention the VIP card in our office, the $260 becomes $79. So we will extend that to all of your friends and family just by sharing this video with them. And if they want to take care of their health, they can call us at the office and redeem this $79, or at the very least go to our Facebook page, like us on Facebook. It's Impact Chiropractic on Facebook, and then you can share this video or share our Facebook page with them and make sure that they get the gift of health that they need. I thank you for showing up tonight. I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate all of you at home, and I hope and wish that you have the healthiest days of your lives. Thank you, guys.